And already in 1934, the airplane with the resounding name NT-20 Maxim Gorky was ready. The technical specifications in the newspapers sounded astounding. 8 engines, 33 meters in length, 42 tons in weight, a wingspan of 63 meters, a speed of 275 kilometers per hour, and a range of 1,000 kilometers. For its time, this was a record. Inside, there were 8 crew members and 72. Who do you think?
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Your support helps the channel grow and motivates me to create even more amazing videos for you.
Passengers. No, propagandists. Because a passenger is something bourgeois. Here, we're talking about warriors of the pen and microphone. On board, they installed a printing press capable of producing up to 8,000 leaflets per hour, a radio center, a film laboratory, a photo laboratory, and beds for resting between propaganda runs. There were actual sleeping quarters in the wings, and the interior was almost like a palace. Soft armchairs, cozy cabins, a library, a buffet, modern ventilation, toilets, refrigerators, everything so that a weary propagandist could have a shot of vodka, snack on caviar, and, reinvigorated, praise Lenin, Stalin, and everyone else who deserved it. These journalists, writers, and poets lived well, receiving large fees, apartments, and luxurious dakas. This was the Soviet elite of the pen, and all of them were carried on the wings of a giant that was created not for the sky, but for airborne pomp. Everything was progressing like clockwork. The big day arrived. The best of the best boarded, propagandists, journalists, party bosses. The plane bearing a resounding name and Gorky's face on its side soared into the sky, but fate had already prepared its own script for it. And then came the star moment, the apotheosis of this heavenly dream. On May 1st, 1935, to the sound of fanfares and the march of tanks on Red Square, the Maxim Gorky takes to the sky. A flying editorial office, a palace of propaganda on wings, a dream bound in the marble covers of party reports. This giant soared into the Soviet sky, the brainchild of Tupolev, at that time the largest airplane in the world, the agit plane Maxim Gorky. The newspapers back then were simply overflowing with pathos. One article stood out in particular. There, the creative elite soared between the lines of inspiration. The artist Boris Efimov had the hero of a Soviet love novel. He was torn between 2 passions, to draw or to write. On one stack of paper were drawings, on the other, text. And all with a single pencil, because who needs a separate one for each activity when there is socialist multitasking? But the correspondent from Komsomolskaya Pravda, who goes by the name of Rosenfeld, has become a symbol of the era. He sits by the porthole sighing with delight, looking down at the neat rows of tanks, and at the same time tearing up his notebook in a creative frenzy. He is restless both from the beauty and from the call of party duty, the ideal Soviet romantic. Writers are running around the cabin, someone is already conceiving a novel, someone else a poem. A cameraman with a heavy camera is wandering down the corridor, and it seems like it's about to fall on someone's head. He captures every flower, every flag, every solemn face in the crowd, so that later the people will weep in front of their screens, and the bosses will hand out awards. From the deck of the Gorky, an aviation march pours out over Moscow, as if it were Stalin's own voice from the heavens. And if the film succeeds, they wrote, we will see shots of exceptional beauty. They had no idea just how exceptional those shots would turn out to be. Because very soon, instead of postcards with party slogans, debris will rain down from the sky. On May 17th, just 2 weeks after that pompous flight, the giant takes to the sky again. They need to film something even better, even more beautiful. To emphasize the scale, they add a few fighter jets. And so, one of those pilots decides to do a loop-the-loop right next to the Gorky. The fighter jet can't handle the maneuver and crashes straight into the engine. The Ant-20 breaks apart like a cardboard prop. The wings were burning, the fuselage was collapsing, pieces of bodies and metal rained down to the ground. The outskirts of Moscow were covered with the charred remains of 49 victims, among them the best engineers, journalists, designers, pilots, the very creators of that same pathos who, just a few days earlier, had been celebrated by the flying editorial office. People whose names were meant to be celebrated in newspapers, not mentioned in disaster reports. Thus ended the short but loud story of the flying palace of Soviet propaganda. A machine created not for flight but for display, for show, not for function. This airplane became a symbol of everything communist ideology was: excessive, overconfident, dangerous. An ideology that intruded everywhere. You might say, but they could build things, couldn't they? They knew how, right? And I will immediately disagree with you. Yes, sometimes they could, but these achievements were isolated. Every such airplane, every such project was the result of concentrating enormous resources and human intellect gathered from across the vast country. All for the sake of a single impressive photo, a single parade, a single film. Meanwhile, dozens of other projects, not as glamorous, not as pompous, were left to rot in the shadows. They weren't shown in movies, they weren't written about in books, because they weren't successful, because they were frightening, because they were the truth. And in the Soviet Empire, the truth was forbidden. These engineering monstrosities, hybrids of flawed decisions, brute force, and fear of superiors, remained out of sight because the real state of technology and science could undermine the creation of yet another Soviet fairy tale. And fairy tales were more important than reality. Always. The Ant-20 is not an airplane. It is a literary steel monument to illusion. The illusion that you can build a utopia on bones, that propaganda has wings, that pathos equals safety. And here is the result. The plane fell apart just like the dream that gave birth to it.